Hi, my name is Mallory Snyder. Today I'm going to be presenting on death in the Amish communities. The reason that I chose the Amish culture was because in the hospital I see a lot of Amish families, and I've kind of seen firsthand the way that they don't show much emotion, and I've always been kind of curious about that. I know, for example, one week we had this little infant with an Amish family, and it wasn't looking good for the infant, and the family wasn't showing much emotion. And I know that Raina told me that that's kind of part of their culture, is they're not allowed to show emotion. So after that, I really wanted to look into it a lot more. So some things I learned about the Amish culture is when someone passes, they actually hold 3 ceremonies for close family and for friends. So one of those ceremonies is held at the house where the person passed away. It's held in one of the rooms, and that room has to be cleared out, nothing in the room, and people come to the house and see the body in the room. So you actually see the body itself 3 different times. You'll see them at that, you'll see them at the actual ceremony, and then you'll see them right before they get buried into the ground. So what they believe is they do believe in heaven and hell, and they believe that it's kind of their fate, If they've been a good person and they've done God's will, then they're going to go to heaven. If they haven't, they're going to go to hell. And they're very serious about this. In fact, they're not allowed to pray about the deceased person, because they think that that kind of affects the outcome, and they don't want their personal prayers to affect where their loved one passes on to. So they believe that the person has gone to heaven to be with God, and so therefore their ceremonies are about celebrating God's glory and celebrating how great it is that God has taken them to this great place. They're actually not supposed to think about the person at all. Their ceremonies are specifically held to praise God and all that He does. Their coffins are actually handmade by someone in their community, and they're made from pine specifically. They actually all do most of the stuff themselves, so usually one person in the community will make the coffin, another person will dig the grave, and other people will make the food for the ceremony after. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. When it comes to dressing the body, the family actually makes the clothes for this. And their clothes have to be pretty bland. They have to be dresses with an apron and a bonnet. Usually the apron and the bonnet that the girls wear that the girls are buried in is what they wore to their wedding. But the dresses have to be pretty plain. Their bodies are embalmed whenever they're buried. There's only a few communities who don't believe in that, but most of the time, generally speaking, they do embalm the bodies. And one thing that I found really interesting is that 4 friends are chosen to carry the body to all the locations. And if the person who passed away was single when they passed away, the 4 friends are going to also be single. If the person was married, then they're going to find 2 couples to carry the body, which I thought that was kind of cool. I've never really heard of that. Immediate family of the person who passed away, they wear black for actually a full year after the person passed away. Kind of what it seemed like was the closer you were to that person, the longer you're going to be wearing black. So close friends might wear black for like up to 6 months, but immediate family usually wears it for about a year, and maybe just a friend would wear it for a couple of months, just to kind of show your mourning without actually expressing it. The only time the person who passed away is mentioned during the ceremonies, since the ceremonies are strictly for praising Jesus and strictly for a sermon and prayers, They're actually only mentioned usually at the end. They'll say their name and their date of birth, which that's kind of interesting that the ceremonies aren't even about the person themselves so much as it is more about just God and how great it is that we get that ending to our lifetime. The tombstones are actually a lot of times left unmarked. In the Amish communities, they have an elder who takes care of a lot of the stuff. It's kind of like what the president would do in the United States. They oversee just everything in the community. So some of the communities will have the elder will have a sheet of paper that tells who's at each spot in the cemetery rather than them actually marking the tombstone itself. Another thing is the Amish community believes in very bland, everything just kind of the same. So with that comes they're not allowed to leave flowers or like photos or any memoriams like on their coffin before they bury them. The coffin is just plain pine wood, and they're just put into that before they're put into the ground. Also, the families aren't allowed to put like flowers on the tombstones. And like I said, a lot of times the tombstones aren't even marked. And if they are marked, it'll just say their name and their date of birth on there, which I thought that was pretty interesting too, because a lot of times you'll see like flowers sitting on gravestones or flowers on the coffin before they're buried in the ground. One interesting thing was whenever they're being buried into the ground, a lot of times the family members, they'll each take some sod and they'll throw it into the hole before they're put into it, which I thought that was kind of cool. A cool part of it. After all the ceremonies, the families go home and they eat very, very traditional food. So they eat like, a lot of times they'll eat pork or cornbread or cornmeal of some sort. Just very plain, bland foods, and they'll just kind of have everyone come from the ceremony to their house to eat and mourn their death, basically. So after everything happens, the Amish are allowed to visit the ceremony, but they're not allowed to pray for their one who's passed on. And they're also not allowed to, of course, like I said, bring any flowers or anything. For up to a year, like I said, how they wear black for up to a year. Also, the friends and family, they'll come visit them every Sunday for a year to kind of mourn with them and have a meal with them and do that sort of stuff. Amish families aren't really allowed to show much emotion, and if they do, it's supposed to be very, very private. So a lot of times they'll have to kind of hold everything in that they're feeling and kind of keep it to themselves later on. One thing I forgot to talk about is also whenever they are buried, women aren't allowed to have any makeup on or like any jewelry on or anything. They're just supposed to be very, very plain, and obviously the men are very plain as well. They're just going to be wearing a white shirt and just their kind of normal everyday clothes that you'll see them out in the community wearing. So I thought it was really interesting to learn about the Amish community. It's very different than everything that I've grown up with, because in my family we do show a lot of emotion. We talk about it. We talk about deaths a lot after it happens, and that's kind of how we get our feelings out. We do also have like kind of a meal with my family anytime that we've had ceremonies like that. We've all gone out to eat and kind of talked about their life and celebrated and kind of all got our feelings out. I think it's very different that they don't do that, but I also think that it's very private to them, and that's just kind of how they just take it home with them and deal with it at home. And they kind of have more sense of a community and sense of family, with mourning for up to a year, wearing their black dresses to kind of signify that they are indeed mourning, and it's really cool to just learn about different cultures from what you've always grown up knowing. Thank you so much for listening.